Moving into a new house is supposed to be exciting, a fresh start, a place to build new memories. For my wife, Mia, and me, this house was our dream home. But dreams can turn into nightmares in an instant. And sometimes, the worst part isn't what's in the house. It's the thing that never left. The house was old, built in the early 1900s, with a classic Victorian style. The previous owners had moved away suddenly, leaving behind most of their furniture. That should have been my first red flag. But the price was too good to pass up, and Mia had fallen in love with it immediately. "It just needs a little work," she said, running her fingers along the dusty wooden staircase. I forced a smile. She was right, but something about the place felt wrong. The first few nights were uneventful, just unpacking, cleaning, getting used to the odd creaks and groans of an aging house. Then, on the fourth night, I noticed it. A door in the basement. I had been organizing some old boxes when I saw it tucked away in the far right corner. The basement was unfinished, filled with cobwebs and dust. And this door, it was different, older than the rest of the house. The wood was warped and splintered, the paint peeling like something had been clawing at it from the inside. There was no handle, just a rusted keyhole. And for some reason, I felt sick just looking at it. I called Mia downstairs. She frowned. I didn't even realize we had a second door down here. I reached out and pressed my palm against it. It was cold, too cold. Mia grabbed my wrist. "Let's not mess with it, okay?" There was an edge to her voice, like she felt it too, the wrongness of it. I nodded. "Yeah, okay." But that night, as I lay in bed, I kept thinking about it, and I made a decision. Tomorrow, I was going to open it. The next morning, Mia left early for work. The second she was gone, I went to the basement. I grabbed my toolbox, knelt in front of the door, and began picking the lock. It was stubborn, like the metal had fused together over time. But after nearly 10 minutes of struggling, it clicked. The door creaked open, and behind it was another set of stairs. A narrow, wooden staircase led even deeper underground. A foul odor drifted up, damp, moldy, like rotting wood and stagnant air. A gust of cold air hit my face, sending a shiver down my spine. I hesitated. Everything in me was screaming, "Don't go down there." But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And so, against all better judgment, I stepped inside. The staircase was longer than it should have been. By the time I reached the bottom, I felt like I had descended twice the depth of the actual house. The air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't describe. Then, my flashlight landed on something that made my blood run cold. There was a room, a small, circular chamber with walls made of stone, and in the center, a wooden chair, with ropes tied around the arms and legs. The ropes were frayed, like they had been used many times. And the floor? The floor was covered in deep scratches, like something had been dragged across it, or like someone had been trying to crawl away. I took a step forward, and the door slammed shut behind me. My flashlight flickered. A wave of cold air rushed past me, and I felt it. Something was in here with me. I reached for the stairs, my heart hammering. But when I turned around, the staircase was gone. Just a solid stone wall, like I had never walked down any steps at all. And then, the whispering began. It was soft at first, almost like a hiss. Then, a voice. "You shouldn't have opened the door." I whipped around, my breath caught in my throat. The room was empty, but the voice was closer now, right behind me. I spun back toward the chair, and I saw it. A shadow, sitting, waiting. Then, it began to stand up. I ran. I slammed my fists against the stone wall, screaming for help. The whispering grew louder, overlapping voices, too many at once. Then, a hand grabbed my shoulder. I turned, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was on the basement floor. The door was shut again. No stairs, no stone chamber, no chair, like it had never been there at all. I scrambled to my feet, gasping for breath. That's when I saw Mia standing at the top of the stairs, eyes wide. "What the hell happened?" she asked. I tried to answer, but I couldn't find the words. Because I knew, whatever I had found down there, it wasn't gone. And that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I heard it, the whisper. You let me out. After that night, I told myself it had been a dream, a hallucination. Maybe I had hit my head when I fell. Maybe the stress of moving had finally gotten to me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had opened something, and whatever had been locked away wasn't trapped anymore. Mia didn't press me for details, but I could tell she sensed my fear. The next morning, she found me boarding up the basement door with a hammer and nails. She stood there for a long moment before finally saying, "You know that won't stop it, right?" Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she wasn't really asking, like she already knew. That was the first time I felt it. A shift in the air, like something had attached itself to us, like it was watching. The days that followed were quiet, too quiet. The house felt different. The air was colder. Rooms that had once felt warm and safe now felt strange and foreign. At night, Mia would wake up staring at the ceiling, eyes wide, like she had been listening to something. When I asked, she would just shake her head. But I knew. She had started hearing it too. Then, on the third night, things got worse. I woke up to the sound of whispers, but this time, it wasn't coming from the basement. It was coming from the hallway outside our bedroom. I sat up in bed, my heart hammering. Through the dim glow of the night light, I saw it. The bedroom door was open, and in the dark hallway beyond, a shadow moved. A wave of ice-cold fear washed over me. I slowly reached for Mia, gripping her wrist. But the moment I touched her, she sat up straight. Fast, too fast, like she had been waiting, like she already knew something was in the house. She turned to me, eyes wide. "Do you see it?" she whispered. The whispering grew louder, like hundreds of voices overlapping. I swallowed, forcing myself to look, and there, standing in the doorway, was a figure. It was tall, with a hunched posture, its limbs too long, too thin. Its head was tilted, like it was studying us. And the worst part? It looked familiar, like I had seen it before, but I couldn't remember where. Then, without a sound, it stepped forward. Mia let out a choked breath. I could feel her shaking beside me. Neither of us moved. The air was heavy, like the whole room was drowning in static. Then, in a voice just above a whisper, the figure spoke. "You opened the door." I don't know what came over me, but something inside snapped. I lunged for the lamp on the nightstand, flipping it on. The second the light hit the figure, it was gone, like it had never been there. But the bedroom door was still wide open. Mia was already out of bed, slamming the door shut. We sat there in silence, our breathing ragged. Then, finally, Mia spoke. "We need to leave." Her voice wasn't panicked. She wasn't asking. She was certain. I nodded. We started packing that night, but the house didn't want us to leave. The next morning, as I loaded boxes into the car, I noticed something. The front door was open, even though I had locked it. I stepped inside, a sinking feeling in my gut. The air was still, too quiet. Then, from the basement, I heard something, a knocking sound, slow, rhythmic, coming from behind the sealed basement door. I turned to Mia. She had heard it too. Neither of us spoke. Then, after a long silence, the knocking turned into scratching, like something was crawling up the other side of the door. We ran. We left everything behind. We never looked back. 2 weeks later, we got a call from the new owner. She was confused, asking why we had left so suddenly. I didn't tell her, didn't warn her. But just before she hung up, she said something that made my blood run cold. "You know, it's the strangest thing," she said. "I found an old door in the basement, sealed shut." She let out a small laugh. "But I got it open, and the line went dead. I still wake up at night, heart pounding, listening for whispers. And sometimes, in my dreams, I see the basement door, still wide open, still waiting." Moving into a new home is supposed to be a fresh start, a place where memories are made, where life unfolds in a predictable, safe way. But what if the house you move into wasn't finished with its story? What if there were parts of it that weren't supposed to exist? And what if, one day, you found a room that wasn't there before? That's what happened to me, and I wish to God I had never stepped inside. My wife, Hannah, and I bought our new house in September. It was a beautiful Victorian home, a little older than we had planned on, but the price was too good to pass up. The previous owners were in a hurry to sell, the realtor had said. That should have been my first red flag. But Hannah was in love with it, and I just wanted her to be happy. We moved in a week later. At first, everything was normal, until we discovered the room. It happened about a month after we moved in. Hannah had gone out for groceries, and I was in the spare bedroom, unpacking boxes. That's when I noticed something strange. The room was longer than it should have been. I stood there, staring at the far wall, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. There had always been a bookshelf there, or at least, I thought there had been. But now, there was a door. I frowned. That door hadn't been there yesterday. Had it? I walked over, running my fingers along the wood. It was smooth, untouched, like it had been there for years. But I knew it hadn't been. I had walked through this room 100 times. There had never been a door here. So why was it here now? I hesitated, my heart pounding. Then, against every instinct in my body, I turned the handle. The door swung open effortlessly, and behind it was a room that shouldn't exist. The air inside was stale, dusty, like it hadn't been touched in years. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, curling at the edges. A single wooden chair sat in the center, and all around the room were mirrors, tall, dusty, floor-length mirrors lining every wall. The air felt thick, suffocating, like something was watching me. But there was no reflection. Not of me, not of the chair, not of anything. A cold chill crept down my spine. I took a slow step forward, the wooden floor creaking beneath my feet. That's when I noticed something. On the far side of the room, another door, just like the first, identical. And for some reason, I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. I stepped closer, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The door was slightly ajar, just enough to see darkness beyond it. I reached out. Then, a shadow moved inside the mirror. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. It was just a flicker, a shift in the glass, like someone had passed by. But there was no one else in the room. The air grew heavy, thick with something I couldn't describe. I turned my head slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Then, in the mirror closest to me, I saw myself. For a moment, I felt relief. The reflection was normal, just me, standing in the doorway. Then, I blinked, but the reflection didn't. A sharp coldness spread through my chest. I took a step back, and my reflection smiled. But I hadn't moved. I stumbled backward, slamming into the wall, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. The reflection just stood there, grinning, head tilting at an unnatural angle. Then, from behind me, the other door creaked open. A gust of cold air rushed past me, and in the mirror, my reflection stepped forward. I didn't, but he did. One step, then another. His eyes were wrong, too dark, too hollow, like they weren't made for seeing. Then, just as he reached the edge of the glass, I slammed the door shut. The second the door clicked into place, the room changed. The mirrors were normal again. The air was still, and when I looked at my reflection, it was just me. I ran out of that room, slamming the door behind me. My hands shook as I pressed against it, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. And then, the worst part, the door was gone. I stared at the wall where it had been, my mind reeling. It was like the door had never been there at all. Just smooth wallpaper, untouched, unchanged. Had I imagined it? Had I lost my mind? I backed away, shaking my head. Then, behind me, I heard it. A whisper. Let me out. When Hannah got home, I didn't tell her what had happened. But that night, as we lay in bed, she turned to me, her voice soft. Did we always have a mirror in the hallway? My stomach dropped. I turned to look, and there, at the end of the hallway, was a tall, floor-length mirror, one I had never seen before, and in its reflection, the room was still there. Hannah's words sent a wave of cold terror through me. Did we always have a mirror in the hallway? I forced myself to turn my head slowly, and there it was, a tall, floor-length mirror at the end of the hallway. A mirror I had never seen before, and in its reflection, The room was still there. The breath hitched in my throat. The door that had disappeared from the wall, it was still wide open in the mirror. The chair was still there. The other door, the one in the back of the room, was still slightly ajar. But worst of all, something was moving inside. A shadow flickered past the doorway in the mirror. It was too fast, too fluid, like it wasn't walking, but gliding. I reached for Hannah's wrist, gripping it tightly. "Don't move," I whispered. She stiffened. "What? Why?" I could feel her trembling beneath my touch. Then, from inside the mirror, the door creaked open a little wider. The air in the hallway grew thick, heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. And then, the thing inside the room stepped forward. I froze. It was tall, its limbs unnaturally long. But the worst part? It was me. A perfect reflection. Same face, same clothes. But the eyes, they were wrong. Too dark, too hollow. And it was smiling. A slow, deliberate grin, as if it had been waiting for me to notice. Then, without a sound, it stepped out of the doorway. I yanked Hannah backward, stumbling away from the mirror. "What the hell is that?" she cried. I couldn't answer, because the figure in the mirror was still moving forward, one slow, deliberate step at a time. But as it walked, its reflection stayed in place. It wasn't coming toward us. It was coming out. The glass of the mirror rippled, like water disturbed by a stone. I could see its hand pushing against the surface, fingers stretching, pressing outward, the glass bulging like thin plastic. I grabbed Hannah and shoved her toward the bedroom. "Move!" I shouted. We slammed the door shut behind us. Then, a soft, rhythmic tapping came from the other side. It was knocking, slow, measured, like it wasn't in a hurry, like it knew there was nowhere else for us to go. Then, a voice, low, familiar. "Let me in." Hannah was hyperventilating. I pressed my hand over her mouth. "Shoo." The tapping continued. Then, click. My stomach dropped. The door had unlocked itself. I lunged forward, gripping the knob. It wouldn't budge. From the other side, the knob began to turn. A slow, deliberate motion. I grabbed the dresser, shoving it against the door. The moment it hit the wood, the knocking stopped. A long, tense silence stretched between us. Then, a whisper, right next to my ear. "You already let me out." I whipped around. No one was there. Just Hannah, shaking in the corner of the room. Then, from the hallway, we heard it. Footsteps, moving away, not toward the front door, but deeper into the house. I grabbed my phone, fingers trembling. I dialed 911. The moment I pressed the call button, the line went dead. The screen glitched, filling with static before going completely black. Hannah clutched my arm. "We have to get out of here." I nodded. We didn't bother grabbing anything, just bolted out of the bedroom. The hallway was silent, too silent. The mirror was still there, but now, the reflection was normal. No door, no strange figure, just us. But I knew better. It was still here, waiting, watching. We made it to the front door. I fumbled with the lock, my hands slick with sweat. Finally, it clicked open. We raced outside, slamming it shut behind us. The moment we stepped off the porch, every light in the house flickered off at once. A final, silent warning. A message. "You don't leave." I do. We never went back. The next day, we called the realtor and told her to put the house back on the market. She didn't ask questions, almost like she already knew. I tried looking up the history of the house. There were no records, no previous owners. Like the house itself didn't exist before we found it. Or maybe it existed somewhere else. That was 6 months ago. Hannah and I have moved far away. We don't talk about it. We don't look at old photos. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up and see a mirror across the room, one I don't remember putting there. And in the reflection, the door is still open. There's nothing like the feeling of moving into a new home. The fresh start, the excitement, the possibilities. But for me, the excitement didn't last long. Because in that house, we were never alone. My wife, Erin, and I had been searching for a home for months. We wanted something affordable in a quiet neighborhood where we could start our next chapter together. When we found the house, it seemed perfect. A two-story home on a secluded cul-de-sac, big enough for our future family but still cozy. The previous owners had moved out in a hurry, and the real estate agent gave us a great deal. It felt too good to be true, and looking back, it was. The first 2 weeks were normal. Unpacking, decorating, getting used to the strange creaks and groans an old house makes. But then, things started to feel off. At night, Aaron and I would be lying in bed when we'd hear it. Faint scratching, coming from inside the walls. At first, I brushed it off. It's just mice, I told Aaron. But I wasn't so sure. The sounds weren't random. They were deliberate. Like something was moving inside the walls. And the worst part? It followed us. No matter what room we were in, the scratching was always nearby. Like it was listening. Then, one night, I woke up to a different sound. Not scratching, not creaking, but a whisper. A voice, muffled, distant, coming from the vents. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. I held my breath, listening. And then, clear as day, I heard it. I see you. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I shook Aaron awake. Did you hear that? I whispered. She groggily rubbed her eyes. Hear what? I held my breath, waiting. But the voice was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. And from that moment on, I knew. Something was inside our house. The next day, I searched the house from top to bottom. I checked the basement, the attic, the crawl space. Nothing. No signs of pests. No signs of anything. But as I was about to give up, I noticed something strange in the closet. A small air vent, bolted shut. That wouldn't have been weird. Except there was no vent on the other side of the wall. Like the space behind it wasn't supposed to exist. I grabbed my tools and started unscrewing the bolts. The second the last screw came loose, the vent cover fell forward, and I saw it. A hidden room. It was small, barely big enough for a person to sit inside. The walls were covered in scratches, and in the middle of the tiny space, there was a blanket, a pile of old food wrappers, and a notebook. My stomach dropped. Someone had been living in our walls, and judging by the half-eaten food, they still were. I snatched the notebook and flipped it open. The pages were filled with handwritten notes. Not random scribbles, not nonsense, but logs, entries about us. 7:23 a.m. The woman is in the kitchen making coffee. 9:45 a.m. The man left for work. 3:30 p.m. She's in the shower. 11:10 p.m. They are in bed, watching. I slammed the book shut, blood running cold. I bolted up the stairs, grabbed Aaron by the wrist. We're leaving. Now. She saw my face, saw the panic, and didn't argue. We ran to the car, but as we were pulling out of the driveway, I saw it. A figure standing in the upstairs window, watching us, smiling. We called the police immediately. They searched the house, top to bottom, and when they opened the hidden crawl space again, the food was gone. The blanket was gone. The notebook was gone. But one thing remained. A single, handwritten note, taped to the wall. In perfectly neat handwriting it read, "I'll miss watching you." We never spent another night in that house. We moved in with family while we worked with the police. They never found the person. The real estate agent had no records of previous tenants. No one in the neighborhood knew anything. It was like whoever lived there never existed. That was 3 years ago. To this day, I can't sleep without checking the vents, the closets, the walls, because I know someone was there. And sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear it. The scratching, the whispering, and I wonder if whoever was watching us has found a new home